We are made unclean by sins that we've committed and by sins that have been committed against us. So how are we made clean? I want to encourage you with Colossians chapter 1. Could you turn there with me if you haven't already? Colossians chapter 1. And I want to read to you, starting with verse 11. May you be strengthened with all power according to his glorious might for all endurance and patience with joy. What Paul's going to show us is you're unclean. We were unclean. We've been made clean. You were disgraced. God's given you grace. You were shamed. Jesus wipes that shame away. Giving thanks to the Father, verse 12, who has qualified you. Underline that word. He has qualified you. And look who's done the qualifying work. God has qualified you. Many of you feel unqualified. It's amazing. We led a man to the Lord a few months ago. Right here after one of the services, the gospel was preached. He said, I want to become a Christian. We led him to the Lord. We said, you must be baptized now. And he said, I can't be baptized yet. Why not? Because I don't feel worthy. I don't feel qualified to be baptized. I don't know to this day if he's been baptized. And right then I understood that God is still doing a work in him. It's still bringing him to Jesus. He still hasn't let go of himself. And many of us need to let go of what has happened in the past. And I don't mean that in an Oprah Winfrey sort of a way. I don't mean to say, just let go and let God and all that other stuff. I don't mean it that way. I don't mean just forget it and move on and you're going to be okay. I don't mean it that way at all. Please make no mistake about it. But what I mean is that we need to hold on to God. Don't let go and let God. Let go and grasp on, clutch to God, who has qualified you, who has rid you of that disgrace, of that shame, of that guilt. God has qualified you. He goes on to share in the inheritance of saints in light. He has delivered us. That's a key theme this morning. He has delivered us from what? The domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son. Many of you live and have memories of, and it's crushing your heart of living in that context, a domain of darkness. I've heard heart-wrenching stories of women who've grown up with sexually abusive fathers. Some of you are those women. I've heard heart-wrenching stories of young boys who have been taken advantage of by their relatives and by friends, so-called friends. And it's a domain of darkness. Some of you have continued that pattern. You were abused, and so you abuse. And you're living in a domain of darkness. Some of you, because you were abused, you have addictions such as pornography addictions and sexual addictions. And you still live in that domain of darkness. But what Paul tells us is that God has qualified you by faith in Jesus Christ and has transferred you from that disgusting land into an inheritance to be shared with Jesus himself. He has ripped you out of the darkness, out of the shame, and out of that guilt, and transferred you into the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have, what does that word say? In whom we have what? Redemption. Redemption. Where we have been paid for. Where we have been bought. And what is that redemption? How does Paul define it? The forgiveness of sins. Because of the cross, God sees you not by what has been done to you, but solely by what Jesus has done for you. You see, without the cross, this passage doesn't read this way. Without Jesus, without his life, his perfect life, without his death, his perfect death, without his resurrection, his destruction of death, this passage doesn't even exist. It becomes about what we've done. It becomes a worse picture. It becomes something along the lines of, well, you've sinned, you've been sinned against, you're shamed and disgraced, and well, I got nothing. Try to get through it. Without this passage, all you have is Oprah Winfrey. All you have is therapy. All you have is Dr. Phil. All you have is a bunch of self-help. All you have is yourself. And isn't yourself the one who you're running from right now? You need something outside of yourself, a Messiah outside of you. You're not defined by what happened 10 years ago. You're not defined by what happened 20 years ago. God doesn't look at you and say, damaged, abused. They asked for it. He looks at you and he says, perfect. My son, his righteousness, my redemption, forgiveness, restored, no shame. Son, daughter. Isn't that incredible?